Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. It's the Six Nations break week. Ireland, 2 wins out of 2 so far, 2 bonus point wins out of 2. 36-0 against Italy at the Aviva Stadium. 6 tries, never in doubt. No game this week. United Rugby Championship is back, but there is still a lot to talk about. I'm joined by Bernard Jackman and Johnny Murphy. Afternoon, fellas.
Afternoon,
yeah. Good afternoon.
Before I talk about the game against Italy and look back at that, I will actually get straight in and talk about the game against Wales next week, because it looks like there's probably a bit of a selection for Andy Farrell to make. A lot of reports at the moment. Hugo Keenan, he picked up a bit of a knee injury against Italy in the second half on Sunday. Early indications are that it doesn't look long-term, but there's a good chance he's not going to be fit for the game against Wales. And I suppose if this was to have happened 12 months ago, instantly, Bert, you'd be thinking, okay, one of Mac Hansen or Jimmy O'Brien can easily slot in there. It should be fine. Obviously, both of those players are out at the moment, and it creates a nice little bit of a selection dilemma as to what to do with that 15 shirt potentially next week.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think obviously he could move James Lowe there. He could bring Shane Daly in. He could move Jack Crowley back to 15 and play with Harry Byrne just as part of giving Harry another opportunity. Obviously, Harry played off the bench at the weekend. Jack's been a class, and Jack's clearly number one. But obviously, having a 10 who can play fullback mid-game, it gives Ireland showed against France they went 6-2. So if we do that in the future, and Jack Crowley has, I know he's played before, but if he's played a Six Nations game at 12 or 15, that could be a string to his bow. I think Farrell will relish this. I mean, obviously, he doesn't like Hugo Keenan is really important to us, but he lives it that he wants the team to have a little bit of adversity and challenges, and people step up, and they generally do. So Hugo's been a consistent, incredibly consistent player for Ireland, and also been very durable. And if he is to miss that game, it will give someone else a chance. But as you said, without Mac or in particular Jimmy O'Brien, there's no obvious replacement who's going to step in there.
Yeah, it's funny you say like he was embracing all those injury challenges last year. It got to the point he was talking about it so much, I was wondering, was he actually going out and injuring the players himself? But as Bert said, Johnny, like there's no standout candidate to go in there, but there are plenty of legitimate candidates. So as you said, like, you've got Jack Crowley who could go in there and potentially play Frawley or Harry Byrne at 10. Kieran Frawley could easily go in there as well. Jordan Larmour, Jacob Stockdale, all players who have had experience playing at full back. And even if you want to get a bit mad, like put James Lowe back there or something, and you still have the big kicking option. What would you like to see him do next week if he does have to make that decision?
Yeah, I think maybe Kieran Frawley could slot in there. He's fitted in there for Leinster at times when they rotated, or when Keenan's been kind of away during the Christmas period. And then you're not reshuffling the deck too much. Jack Crowley is going very well. He's showed kind of a few added strings to his bow there at the weekend in terms of his running game, how flat he can play to the line, his offloading, his physicality. So you just kind of want to give him a bit more game time and leave that kind of 9-10 axis, or particularly that 10 axis, kind of solidify itself there. But I think the two options will probably be Frawley, or as Bert said, play Harry Byrne and then move Crowley back to 15. But I think they probably like, in terms of how they play, they like that extra distributor in the back and organising on the blind side that Hugo Keenan does a huge amount of, and his work rate overall from a backfield perspective is absolutely ridiculous. So he is going to be a loss, but they have to find and figure someone out that when they are missing, they're probably down to look at probably their fourth choice option at 15 with, Mac Hansen and Jimmy O'Brien out. But yeah, I think they already have that left foot option in James Lowe, and he works well on that left wing. So probably one of the versatility of Crowley or Frawley for me fits in that pocket.
And Bert, like, you ran through some of the options there. Which one would you prefer to see back there?
I actually, for the sake of progression, either Frawley, who obviously, if he goes 6-2, is really good value there. I'd like to see him get some Six Nations time. Big fan of his. Or give Harry Byrne a start at 10. I think Wales isn't a scary game for us. You know, everybody is in such good form that it would be great to see Harry Byrne get 60 minutes at 10 and Crowley play a fullback. There'll be either Frawley or Crowley fullback for me.
On Harry Byrne, actually, he got a nice little cameo off the bench on Sunday, Johnny, and he was someone like he hasn't played for Ireland for more than 2 years, and so, partly through just the consistent run of injuries that was kind of hampering him, and partly through a bit of form as well. But he got a chance on Sunday, and in fairness to him, he put in a few, like, whatever he could in the 20, 30 minutes that he was out there, but some nice little positive involvements. He tried one of those little classic Johnny Sexton wraparounds just after he came on. It didn't work out. It was probably a bad pass from Robbie Henshaw more than anything, but for which try was it over on the far side? For James Lowe's try, for example, brought that ball right up to the line, got the pass away quite late, and got a whack in the ribs for his troubles as well. But it's that sort of stuff that we were praising Jack Crowley for last week, of, you know, bringing the ball up right to the point of contact and opening up defenses like that. He did himself no harm on Sunday.
No, not at all. He's a top class player. And I think probably the opportunity, obviously with Johnny, retiring, the opportunity for kind of those 3-4-10s that are in and around the mix there, with obviously Ross being injured, Sam Prendergast being brought in as that development player. The opportunities that come their way with Crowley being clear first choice, they have to take them when they get them. Otherwise, there's someone else that will pop up. So, he was good, and he's a really high quality player. He's just been very unlucky with the run of injuries, as you said. But I think the more game time that he can get, the more robust he'll become. It's kind of a chicken egg, situation where you want to get really fit and get more game time, but when you keep getting those knocks and they keep setting you back, it's very hard to kind of get that robustness in, because you're not doing kind of the day-to-day training of everyone else. So, but yeah, he was very good, and he's a live option, going forward.
It'd be a tough one for Keenan, obviously. I know he's got a nice little run perch in terms of starts over the last three and a half seasons now. But he was having, I thought, one of his best games for a while on Sunday. Like, he was early on in the match when the game was lacking a bit of spark. It was him that actually provided with that quick tap of the mark and breaking up the pitch, leading to the first try, and was looking really, really sharp, counter-attacking as well. It's going to be interesting to see whoever does go back there, how they fit into the role he plays, because he does do so much for the team, both defensively and offensively.
Yeah, no, and he's like he's obviously one of the most standout performers in terms of consistency, but I think he's got a massive leadership role. And I think watching from behind the stand, behind the goals at the weekend, like his talk off the ball, his ability to help James Lowe and Calvin Nash be in the right position, his movement. So once he triggers that there's a kick likely to come, his ability to read the body language and kick shape and be gone. Like, he's gone ahead of the kick nearly, which obviously means that it's so hard to find grass against him. He's probably just a complete player, and I think we're seeing him better with the ball in hand now. I think he's a better broken field runner than he was. He was never a bad one, but I see him now as a counter-attacking threat. I think teams are going to get more and more wary about kicking to him.
I don't think you can also underestimate in the defensive system of a 13-2 system how important your fullback is, because he's one of the two people who are in the backfield all the time. And there's a huge amount of space for you to cover, particularly when you're trying to build line speed. How teams can break it down is by kicking and making sure that balls kind of land in your hands rather than getting grass is huge. And when you watch him and you player cam him from in behind, his work rate and chat is just off the charts. And people will say that, back to Jared Payne's time, the defensive system, how important a 13 is, and you're a kind of defensive leader. And that's true, but I don't think 15s in particular in that style of defense, how important they are, how their organizational skill is, and particularly if one of your wingers can get lost when they're backfield, how their micro communication to that individual his is top class. He's one of the best 15s in the world, and I think his engine just allows him to under fatigue to continue to chat and just organise in that backfield role. And you see he's swapping guys in and out, kind of on the edges from kind of 20, 30 meters away. And balls very rarely find grass, which is a huge asset to the backfield cover in that defensive system of 13-2.
Yeah, and it's probably no harm for whoever is going to be coming in next week that they've probably got an extra few training sessions to get up to speed and everything with no game this weekend. On the performance as a whole then against Italy, Bernard, it's hard to know what to make of it really. Italy weren't really up to much, but ultimately Ireland, with 6 changes, heavily rotated team, coming in off the back of a big high and a big win against France the week before, like all round, it was probably a good afternoon's work. And I think maybe as well, I think a few of us were saying it afterwards, that on one hand you wonder maybe should they have run up the score a little bit more, but then at the same time I think if you're getting beyond 50 to 60 points, you start to question what you're actually getting from the game itself.
Yeah, I thought Farrell afterwards said it was clunky. I think that was quite harsh. I thought it was a lot of really good stuff. It was interesting. I met one of the Italian backroom team before the match and for coffee, and he actually said that he worked with France, he worked with Racing, and he said that this Italian team, talent-wise, in terms of athleticism in a backline in particular, in terms of their ability to fix people and shape and all those things that go into being a good attack, that they are miles ahead of some of the players he's worked with at international level in France. But so I think the most pleasing, if you take that into account, to keep them to 0 is probably the most pleasing aspect, because we were never really stressed. And I think they'll be delighted with that. I think our defence has taken a step forward from the World Cup. And we're very good at slowing down opposition ball, got good spacing. We're starting to get that killer mentality, so the Joe McCarthy jumping out of the line but making the hit, that makes it a little bit more unpredictable. And that's a good thing to have in your defence once there's safety valves in around that, if there's a mistake. And I think we've taken a big step forward there. And I think 36-0, 6 tries, it's a good outing, considering the emotional high of the previous week. The atmosphere is pretty dead. Whatever the changes that Farrell made, from the bench, but also starting team, I think it's a very, very a very good day at the office for us.
And Johnny, ultimately they do look a gear or two pretty much ahead of everyone else at the moment through these opening 2 matches.
Yeah, definitely. And I think their squad is really, showing that in terms of the rotation that they had. And someone like Stuart McCluskey comes in, carries really hard, gets his getting his offloads away, sitting down defenders, and he had a couple of really good kind of deep pull passes where they're running that wrap play, and very accurate in his passing. Yeah, it was a really good performance. There's a couple of things. I think that comes probably with the rotation that people weren't on the same wavelength a couple of times. Casey went down the blind and James Lowe kind of overruns it, or they knock on there just on kind of those late shoulder balls. But that's just combinations too. But all in all, you'd be very happy. I think Bert's, the defense has stepped up. It's interesting that they're probably bringing a bit more line speed and a bit more license to those guys, reading in behind shapes and getting forward and getting pushing through the shapes to put them under pressure. It's so hard for an attacking team, regardless of who they are, how good they are, to exploit space when they continually go backwards. And that's something that was very, very evident throughout the game. Usually you'd have a set piece, on the 10-meter. By the time the ball was turned over, they'd nearly be back in their own half. And that's a huge asset that they have within their defensive system. And they're really bringing that into, that you're seeing that, and you certainly saw that on Sunday.
On that Ireland's defensive setup, then Birch, like Johnny was just talking about there as well, and there was a stat afterwards. Ross Petty, he'd be a very well-known rugby stats guy on X, said Ireland have conceded 12 tries in their last 12 Six Nations games. I can't remember who was second on that list, but it was up in the 20s. We don't really talk about Ireland's defence as much as we do South Africa's, or as much as maybe we were doing France during the World Cup and other countries as well. Simon Easterby has not really been getting the credit I think he probably deserves since switching from the forwards role out to defence a few years ago.
Yeah, it's been very consistent. I suppose that's what makes the New Zealand game and how poorly we defended in that game even more frustrating. Like to get beaten from that 4-man line out, the chip space, etc., like because there was no obvious signs of that. I think like we were going into games very comfortable that we could defend, but we were probably more comfortable we could out attack the opposition as well, and that's where the focus has been on our attack because it's so complex or looks so complex, but actually it's very simple. But everybody's on the same page, and I think now you're seeing against probably some teams who may be taking a step back, or struggling a little bit or rebuilding, that they have no answer. It's based on 2 games, but that they're really struggling to break us down, and that the best of all the provincial work. I think there's been an extra layer added for maybe the Nina Bar influence, but as you said, like 12 games, 12 tries. I mean that this Leinster defense or this Irish defense was a very well established defense beforehand, and Easterby for sure hasn't got the plaudits, and he's just a very quiet fella. You know what I mean? He doesn't look for plaudits, but I think he's in prime position to be the head coach when Farrell goes to the Lions. I think he's incredibly experienced, incredibly well respected, and has flipped from being forwards coach into forwards and defence, and now exclusively looking after one area of the game, which is performing incredibly well.
Yeah, and like then the fact obviously that he was given responsibility for the emerging Ireland 18
Yeah.
months ago, it probably does. You can join up the dots with these things and see that they obviously have plans for him to take on more responsibility as the years go on.
Yeah, I think so, and yeah, and well deserved. Like he's gone about it in a quiet way. Players believe in him. Apparently, I spoke to Gary Ringrose about it, and he'll often throw ideas to the leadership group and say, "Look, what do you think it is? What would you do in a situation?" So, he involves them, and then once they commit to something, it's locked in. There's no second guessing, and yeah, as you said, he was obviously a phenomenal player for Ireland. Very similar as a player, he was like very underrated, but very important to Ireland, particularly under Eddie Sullivan's reign. And yeah, he's gone about his coaching career in a similar manner.
Hmm. We spoke about the changes earlier on, Johnny, and you mentioned Stuart McCluskey as someone who came in and did a really, really good job. Who else? Who else of those players who came in and were given a chance, either a rare chance to impress, like Craig Casey or like a Ryan Baird, or maybe someone like James Ryan, who's an established player who got his chance to get back into the team? Who do you think is coming out of that game pretty pleased with what they did on Sunday?
I think Ryan Baird, his athleticism is off the charts. Like you see that break he makes. They run a tip into the space, and then he's gone. He's over kind of 50 meters, and he's very hard. It looked like at one stage he was going to finish it from his own 22. I just think the athleticism he can bring, particularly even at line out time, but also around the park. He's someone like that he's kind of a bit like Tom Croft in that mold in terms of that athleticism in those wider channels and having them out, but he's probably more physical and bigger stature than probably Tom Croft was. And we don't have those like kind of types of players with that out and out pace in that kind of 6-second row. And then I thought Casey was good. He had a few, as I said already, a couple of things where he probably scooted down the blind or a bit of a bit of inaccuracy once or twice, but he was very much a live wire. And I suppose something that he would have been frustrated was kind of that kick out on the full, in the first half. But in general, I think Ryan Baird just adds something from an athleticism perspective that adds another string to the bow, be it as a starter or coming off the bench when other teams are fatigued. And he's picking up those one-on-ones in those wider channels.
And Birch, like staying on Ryan Baird, we've for years obviously we've been talking about his athleticism and his ability to run in broken fields and really, really pull teams apart with his pace and physicality. But one thing we're really seeing actually in the last year or so is how important he's becoming in line out defense. And it looks like whenever the day comes for Peter O'Mahony to step away from the Irish rugby team, there's a natural replacement there as the key man, and at the front of that line out on defense. He's pulling off a few steals in the last few months and is disrupting teams really, really well in that area.
Yeah, and it's a massive string to his bow, which he didn't have. In actual fact, the talk a couple of years ago was he actually wasn't that coachable in terms of line out drill and line out detail, and that was one of the reasons that he didn't get as many minutes as maybe his athleticism warranted. But there's been a massive shift in him, because he's always like he has a gift in terms of speed and power, and there's a premium on that in the game. So he's always going to be of interest. But I think over the last year, his tight work, his defensive maul work, his defensive line-out work, his work rate off the ball, his post-contact tackle work, post-tackle work have gone, a long way towards being the complete back row. And I think 6 is his position now. I think we'll obviously seen likes of Joe and come through, and James Ryan and Tyburn and Ian Henderson. And Tyburn and Ian Henderson can both play 6, but they're a long way behind what he can do. And I think, Pete obviously is still the man in possession, I think, but with the likes of Ryan Baird, Tom Ahern as well, in fairness, before that injury, he was starting to have a big influence on games, and suddenly we have a bit of depth there. And I just think, talking back to other players, I thought Finlay Beelum had a very good game, and it's really important for us for him to have that game and have a little bit more depth there. Even though Tyke Furlong was very impressive against France, that was really pleasing for him. So we're in a good place. The only position that we're really worried about, I think, is that fullback cover. And as we mentioned earlier, there's probably 3 or 4 players there, and obviously 2 lads injured, who we're very comfortable with starting, and it's just a case of seeing if they can step up.
I think the biggest compliment you could pay Finlay Beelum, actually, just quickly, is that it's at a point now where if he's starting and Tyke Furlong isn't available, it's not even really a talking point anymore.
No, that's huge for us. I mean, that's a long time. So we kind of went John Hayes, Mike Ross, Tyke Furlong, in terms of dominant tight heads first. And to be fair, because of their durability and quality, we always were a little bit worried about what was behind them, and maybe that was false anxiety, whatever. But I think Beelum, over the last 2 years, has shown, both for Connacht and for Ireland, that we should have no worries if he's starting.
Yeah, he's in great form the last few years. Johnny, out in the back line, James Lowe, player of the game. Is he getting to a point now where if he isn't available for a match for Ireland, like if his absence post World Cup had tailed off into the Six Nations, Ireland would be looking very, very different on that side of the pitch with what he's offering in terms of what he can do with the ball in hand, which we've seen from day one when he came to the country, but also the steps he's taken defensively over the last 2 to 3 years, and then on top of that, just his ability and accuracy as well. It's both distance and accuracy with that left foot in terms of exits.
Yeah, I think the left foot is a huge asset of his, and that's improved over the last kind of 2 years. As I say, he always had a big boot, but the accuracy of what he's able to do now, and it's very clear they have a clear setup, get him in behind, and then they have options to do both, off or a run kick, or on the left side off a run kick on the right, or him directly behind, and then they can also run kick off the right. So it just opens up both fields, both sides of the pitch. And then, his ability his power in those kind of close quarter finishes, he takes 2 and 3 guys over the line with them. Like if a one-on-one, he's, 1-on-1, 5 meters out, he's nearly 100%, but even on a 2v1 against him, his footwork and power to kind of get in between the 2 soft shoulders is ridiculous. He is one of our kind of leading lights. If we lose him, obviously Stockdale has that ability, but he was there at the weekend. His performances have lacked kind of where they were 2-3 years ago, but he does give you that left foot option, which is a huge asset in any team being able to kick both sides. So, James Lowe has been unbelievable the last while, and he is someone that that you would miss if he wasn't fit.
Yeah, he's in outstanding form and incredibly actually Birch as well. Like isn't showing any lack of match fitness, having only played a couple of games coming into the Six Nations. It really has been impressive how quickly he's been able to hit the ground running again.
Yeah, that's probably something that, and this might sound harsh, whatever, that I mightn't have said about him, or I might have been worried about him before. You know, kind of player like a horse, a bit stuffy, might need a couple of runs to get going. Whereas, yeah, he obviously had missed some time back home, but he's just come back in bouncing and really enjoying it. And I think his enthusiasm is infectious. Players love him who play with him. Opposition don't like him, and he's doing all the right things.
Before I move on to other games and start looking at Wales and England as well, the scrum and mainly lineout Birch, early signs over the first couple of games, certainly from a lineout point of view, were 100% through, I think, about 25, 26 lineouts on 2 games. I
Yeah,
know Italy didn't really compete whatsoever at the lineout. You know, they were just letting Ireland win the ball and trying to deal with them on the ground. If against Wales you start seeing the likes of David Jenkins and Adam Beard gone up and contesting a little bit more than what Ireland and France have been, would you be confident that Ireland, that what you're seeing from Ireland is going to hold up to a contest, if you know what I mean?
yeah, I think so. I don't think we're going to stay. We're obviously not going to stay at 100%, but
Yeah.
I thought Wales, in fairness, defended the English line out very well, and Jenkins and Adam Beard were threats and menaces in the air. But I think the whole confidence of the Irish line out, the slickness, the speed of throw, the movement, the understanding of where to win it is vastly improved. And it's just, again, you're just looking back on so unfortunate, but that's the way it was. But all they can do now is fix it, and they have. And fair play to O'Connell and his leadership group. When Peter wasn't playing this weekend, and we always put some of an excellent lineup performance down to his ability to influence things, but we did it without him. Yeah, I think we'll attack the rest of the Six Nations. The biggest challenge for us will be Twickenham, because I think England's defensive line out is a work of art. So again, a good outing against Wales, and we'll go there with good momentum.
It's funny you mentioned the World Cup again. It is mad how often during these first couple of rounds of matches where you see something you just go, oh God.
Yeah, well, it's natural. I genuinely think by the end of the Six Nations I won't be looking back, but effectively it was the third game
Yeah.
ago. So 100% in 2, yeah, that's great. But it's just we have to, that's our reference point, unfortunately, until we hopefully win the Six Nations.
On Wales then, so they're coming to Dublin in a couple of weeks' time, or about 10 days' time at this stage, Johnny. The they're not world beaters. 2 defeats out of 2. They've ran Scotland and England close enough in both of those games, but they do seem to have a purpose about them, and they do seem to kind of know what they want to do. And it was interesting. It was interesting on Saturday watching them against England, where England obviously are trying this new defense under Felix Jones, and they're shooting right up. It was very, very interesting to see Wales trying to work around that and dotting loads of kicks down into the corner to try just beat them around that corner. It didn't always work, but it was interesting to see them trying to figure out and roadmap a way around that sort of defense. And it'll leading, I suppose, to what I was going to say is it'll be interesting to see how they come up with something similar to try find a route around Ireland's defense.
Yeah, and it was obviously a clear tactic. I was listening to Jim Hamilton and stuff, and he was saying that, I didn't hear it, but he was saying that Dan Biggar before the game basically more or less gave away their whole game plan in terms of how they were going to attack and what they were going to do in terms of chasing that kick space. And they went at it really well. They had a clear plan. They stuck at it. And they were probably unlucky in a couple of respects. But yeah, it's clear, and people know that if you want to kind of get after and try and stop that, that line speed, you do have to exploit the space that it leaves, but your kicking game has to be really, really accurate to do that. But yeah, like they're a team that obviously have lost, their most experienced players over the last kind of 6 to 12 months. They're a team in transition, but they're a team that when they play Wales, when everyone rocks up to play for Wales, they really step up. And they were, one or two plays away from getting a big win. Over there, they played really well, but it was interesting. They obviously have real belief in what they're being taught to do, and it was interesting that they had that clear game plan and they stuck to it right towards the end.
We lost you for a moment there, Birch. I was saying to Johnny that we were talking about Wales and how it might be a bit patronising to say they're not world beaters, but they do seem to have an idea of what they are, and they, in fairness to them, they weren't afraid to have a go against England, trying to put as many kicks down towards those corners to get around the defence, and even just chipping in behind the first line of defence as well. Didn't always work out, but for an inexperienced side like that, with so many players coming in just in the last 12 months alone, I have enjoyed actually seeing them try to just work things out in the moment.
Yeah, look, I think Gatlin's actually delighted with them, and I think obviously the turning point at half time, that game could have went anyway for them in Cardiff against Scotland. And I mean, anyway, it could have been the end of Gatland. Like if that had continued the way it was going, it would have been impossible to lift them, and the whole lack of stability in the Welsh game would have all put pressure on that senior team, even though a lot of them are very young and haven't been at fault for some of the failings. But they got a great second half against Scotland, and they went to Twickenham, which they loved. Like the Welsh against England, it's a massive game in their psyche. Gatland's had success there in the past. They believe in Gatland, and he's talking about historically, when you put on that red jersey, outperformed some of your parts, and there's probably not a huge. There was a plan to attack that counter, to counter that blitz with kicking, which is pleasing to see. But also, I thought with ball in hand, they hit back inside that blitz. For the Kane try, for when they split them open up the middle as well, with that inside ball. So they had plans around that. And they obviously have Neil Jenkins, they have Alex King, they have Rob Howley, very experienced coaches, and they're able to find opportunities in that. So I think they're buzzing now. It's crazy because they've lost 2 games, but they're actually buzzing in terms of feeling that they're on track, and they're playing fast, and they're playing without any real worries, and that could be dangerous. But there's two divisions in this. There's us and France in terms of talent, and obviously France are way off where they could be, so they're back down with the rest. And Wales and Scotland, for me, and Italy are behind, and England are playing like a team who are down there, like obviously not convincing against Italy, not convincing against Wales. But I think they have the biggest margin of progression. Like their game plan could actually really frustrate us. But if you play against the others, it's a 50-50 game, if that makes sense. So, and I think they're going to Scotland. They're talking about evolving their attack. To beat Scotland, they can't try and outrun Scotland because their attack isn't anywhere near hasn't progressed anywhere near as much because of lack of time. So they'll go to kicking game and defence, and that could be enough to beat them. And likewise, like realistically, to beat Ireland and Twickenham, do they try and evolve their attack, or do they play the type of game that very nearly beat South Africa in a World Cup semi-final when on form there was no contest? And that's the reality of it. So I'm worried about England. I'm not worried about Wales, because I think they will play the type of game that can, I suppose, neutralise a lot of our attack.
I might just make one final point on Wales before moving on, Johnny, and it's the fact that through 2 games they have now conceded 9 penalties in total across those 2, and I'm pretty sure they did not concede a penalty in the entire second half against Scotland and the entire first half against England. You add up the points totals from those 2 halves, and I think it obviously, it tells you what we already knew about rugby. If you can keep the penalty count down, you're going to give yourself an opportunity in games.
Yeah, because you don't give.
I know it's a very, very obvious thing for me to be saying.
Yeah, but if you can not give away penalties, from the far 10-meter in, you're not giving any team entries into your 22. And most teams, at international level are very dangerous in the 22 with power games coming around the corner, their pick and go game. But like when you stop teams getting entries into your half and you don't give them easy pressure releases when you're on top. It's very hard then for teams to get that momentum, and you can just suffocate teams by being really, really disciplined and playing in the right areas. And your discipline will lead to that. If you control your discipline, you're going to be playing in the right areas because you're not giving anyone easy entries. It's then down to your defense. If you can make your tackles, then teams are going to find it very, very hard to get into your half. So that is something, if they can manage to keep their discipline against Ireland and not give Ireland opportunities to launch inside their half, then they have a chance. But that's discipline also comes from a lot of off the pitch stuff and your belief in the system and sticking true to that. So I think, as Bert said, the Welsh, they're definitely playing above the sum of their parts, and discipline, that a lot of that comes from all your off pitch work.
Yeah, just on that, Neil, I think it's a complete outlier. I think it's like people who are criticizing Jack Crowley's goal kicking percentage based on the 2 games. It's not enough of a period of time to actually say they're a disciplined team. Like, no Gatland team has ever shown that tendency before, and I think it's good by them, and they are tidy, but realistically it's because Scotland collapsed and stopped playing, and the referee in that game was obviously rewarding the team who were attacking, and then obviously England, that first half, they had 2 yellow cards themselves, so they were in kind of protection zone. So yeah, it's a lovely stat for them to talk about, and obviously had an influence on making them competitive in the 2 games. But I think, like, against Ireland, if they haven't conceded 3 or 4 penalties in the first half, I'd be shocked. And if they keep it under 10, I'd say that they're a disciplined side then. But I think they need to prove it one more time against a team who actually play for more than 40 minutes.
Yeah, as you say, they're going to be seriously tested a lot more in terms of pace and multi-phase against Ireland than they would have against England. Let's move on to Scotland and France then. Before I talk,
the Scots have put an appeal into World Rugby, so that result, we might have to talk about that in a different way if they get the win. It's like when Thierry Henry handballed the ball. We look for another team in the World Cup.
You took the words out of my mouth. So it's story on the BBC yesterday. Scottish Rugby are calling on the sports governing body to acknowledge that a game-defining mistake was made in the last seconds of Scotland's Six Nations game against France. So it was the decision not to reward Scotland a try. Sam Skinner thought he grounded the ball. I think replays probably showed he probably did, just with the way the protocol went. They weren't able to 100% say for definite that the ball was grounded. On the broader point of it, all of this though, Birch, like, I've been in press conferences so many times with Irish coaches where they're talking, we asked them about something that happened the previous week, or maybe it was line-out issues or scrum issues, and they point out, well, World Rugby have told us that, those penalties should have actually gone to us.
Yeah.
Are we reaching the tipping point now? And I don't want to just mention Scotland in this, because, as I say, it is.
No, we're all in it.
With so many coaches. Have we just reached the tipping point where, like, what is the point of being able to tell everyone, well, World Rugby told us that we actually should have won the game?
Zero really. I think it's a sign that they're desperate to pick that team up. Like, you think about it, so Scotland got a win for the first time in 22 years in Cardiff, but the nature of how they won meant they got onto the bus without actually having that boost to your self-belief that you should get from having done something like that. Do you know what I mean? And then they actually have a very poor French team, but would have been a good scalp for them. They make an error, I think, not to take points or to go for a scrum for after the yellow card for Antonio, and they don't get points out of it. France escape, and then they managed. France had no interest in playing. Like, it was a terrible performance from France, and they lead 16-10, and they just stop playing, and it becomes a Ramos kicking it to Finn back, whatever. And Like they lost all the enthusiasm, all the energy from the crowd, which actually, you know, at home you want to harness that and embrace that. And then obviously they conceded that try from the scrum, couple of defensive errors, and then they get another chance to win it. Like, and then they find a way to lose. Like it's incredible when you think about it. So the last play of the game against Wales was Duhan van der Merwe putting a hand over the goal line to try and get a bonus point win, which would have been 5 points. And he puts the ball down on the defender's ankle. And the last play of the game to beat France was Skinner putting the ball down, and initially on the ankle. Let's be fair, like that's. Yeah. I agree with you. Probably 100% or 99% sure it was grounded, but effectively it was that. It was basically two balls being put on someone's ankle instead of the ground, which has now left them in, I'd say, disarray to a certain extent, a lack of confidence, lack of belief. And I think Gregor and the management team are trying to find, I suppose, validation from World Rugby so they can say to their players, well, look, we actually beat France, even though they only have 1 point and France have 4.
Johnny, what's your take? And I'm not so much interested to know if you think it was a try or not, but more just the like, is this ultimately just trying to deflect as much as possible from the fact that Scotland have blown a win?
Yes and no. I think there's an issue around you know, say the questioning or what is the TMO coming in on and what's he not. Like, so say for instance in the Ireland game, he calls the foot trip on the, I think he calls the foot trip on the Italian player.
Yeah, Menoncello, I think.
Yeah. But like he just radios in and said, oh, there's foot trip there, you need to look at it. You know, and that's it. There's no questions. It's grand. They look, yeah, fine, foot trip, done. Where when it comes to this, he's not involved. He's hamstringed by the question that's asked. It's the process that associated to it has created all of this, and there's no visuals to say that it was 100% grounded either way. And because the ref asked the question, ref says, well, I have no try, then they're kind of hamstrung too. So there is a process that probably needs to be looked at and changed, and also needs to be quickened up, and it'd be very clear, okay, TMO can come in on all of this, he can come in on this, but it's going to be an extra set of eyes, and it's just a conversation rather than this is what I have, you know, like, because, you know, we have all the camera angles, we have that, it needs to be used in the correct way, and it's not being used in the correct way, and people are talking about it all the time, and rugby is very complicated anyway, and it's just being made more complicated, and I think that's the major difficulty. But it's, you know, how is it sorted, I think, is the biggest thing from an overall. That incident, yeah, probably was a try. They're very unlucky, but referee's decision is the referee's decision, and they get stuff wrong, TMOs get stuff wrong, but I think the process associated to how they got to that decision is also wrong.
Well,
I think, Neil, we've had 6 games. We've had 6 games, and we've had pretty low quality. I think, to be fair, like we've had drama in Scotland, we've had drama in Cardiff. The Italian England game wasn't great. Ireland France wasn't great because it was one-sided, to be fair. But like we haven't had, you know, Six Nations is an amazing competition, but we're not talking about the game as such. We're talking about the punt law and how boring it is. We're talking about maybe an incorrect TMO decision because of a lack of clarity. Like there's a massive need to make the game simpler, and also I'd say make it easier for referees to be. I think they're really struggling to keep up. And that's no disrespect to them. The game has moved on, and technology doesn't always help them either. Like I think if you like, I watch a lot of NRL. NRL is a great spectacle. It's fan friendly for people who are there, TV friendly for fans at home.
TMO decisions are really, really quick.
Really quick, but they give the benefit of the doubt. They're nearly trying to find a way not to give the try. You know what I mean? Like, and even so, some of the things you'll see, like really acrobatic wings, you know, diving to score in the corner, and they'll generally they'll give the benefit of the doubt to the attacker, and they don't have the hold up system that we have, you know, with pick and goes there. But yeah, that's a simple thing. You know what I mean? Like make a decision quickly. and go with your gut or the likely probability. And look at Ireland, if Ireland or France there, and we say there's no evidence, we can, like, that's the other side of the coin. But I think once it changes, everyone will eventually get will see the value in it. But at the moment, we're stuck kind of in these protocols, and they can actually hinder common sense. And even around some of the high shots, etc., they can actually box the TMO or the bunker system or the referee into a corner when, realistically, the rugby, like, even go back to I know there's a lot of people think I'm wrong, but the red card last year in England, in the England game with Freddie Stewart or whatever, I think once you go into the protocol system there and follow the guidelines, you're screwed. You can only find a red card. Whereas, I think, there's times when we know the likelihood is there's no intent there. It was an accident. It was a rugby collision, a rugby incident. And likewise, that's probably it. That's 99% sure a try, but we have no footage of it being over the line. So he can't. I feel sorry for Brian McNeice there. I think, the fact it took him 4.5 minutes, it was pretty obvious he was trying to find what he knows, I'd imagine, was the right decision, which was to try, but he couldn't. And he's a man of integrity. So he stuck within the protocols. He did his job.
And as you say, like, he spent 4.5 minutes looking over that. And the key phrasing in all of this is to change those decisions, or for the TMO to be able to award a try in that instance. It has to be
try, no try.
It has to be but it has to be a clear and obvious try. He has to clearly and obviously see the ball grounded on the line. And I think by its very definition, if you need to look at a replay more than 3 times, it's not clear and obvious. If it's clear and obvious, you see it within 2 or 3. So I think you can simplify it like that. We are running out of time. I do want to quickly mention, though, and you mentioned the DuPont law and the 10-meter law, or whatever we're going to call it at the moment. And it's interesting. I saw you tweeting Super Rugby this season are going to be essentially binning that part of the law. If globally we do see this thing scrapped within the next few months, do we have Finn Russell to thank for it, after he kind of exposed the ridiculousness of it in the last 2 games by just catching the ball and standing still for several seconds? Like, I mean,
it's interesting because they're the team, I think.
Like, do you think a player like him, who we all associate with being very, very exciting, is he trying to make a point by actually just standing still and saying, look at how stupid this is?
Yeah, possibly. He's strong enough mentally to kind of do that. Like, he has been the most obvious person doing it. And again, he's a player whose natural is to attack. I was with Stuart Hogg yesterday, and like he said, it would have frustrated him so much, and it would have frustrated Finn, it would frustrate Gregor, because they used to light up when they saw a ball go over their head and look to sprint back to assess where the opportunity is to run, and then it's just an absolute killer. And look, I think the prevalence of it we've seen in fairness to Scotland and the Scotland-Wales game, Scotland-France game in particular, has put it up in lights. Super Rugby obviously have time to adapt. Super Rugby, I was talking to a friend of mine coaching in New Zealand, and he said there's never been as little interest in this Super Rugby competition. I mean, New Zealand rugby is on its knees. The All Blacks, what they did in the World Cup, maybe stop the rot or stop the focus, but realistically they need the Super Rugby competition to catch the imagination. Obviously they don't like playing each other all the time. And then obviously the Australians have been very uncompetitive, and the South Africans have come north. So they are going to apparently be even more radical. That's not radical, that's just a common sense rule, but they're going to try and find ways of making the game easier to play, easier to watch, easier to coach, without becoming rugby league. And I think if that works there, it's going to be give a roadmap for what can happen here. Nothing can change mid-competition. That would be unfair on players and coaches. So I'm actually part of a working group. We're getting together after the World Cup, or after the Six Nations with World Rugby, and it's a load of referees, coaches, administrators, to talk about basically the laws and try and find what we can do. So I would love to think that we can definitely get rid of the DuPont law for the summer tours and beyond, and we can start looking at other areas. And maybe it's now that example of Sam Skinner, that's something that we can actually say, well, look, this is the issue here, and talk about making it better, making it easier for officials to do their job. I mean, imagine being Nick Berry this week, or Brian McNeice. Like, it's horrible. It's horrible for Gregor Townsend, but it's equally horrible for them, because they were so hamstrung by what they are told they need to do.
You shouldn't have revealed that. You're going to be inundated with direct messages now.
I know. In fairness, look, it's good. It's like, I think the reason I'm there is because hopefully I can throw some stupid ideas up and maybe one or two of them might land. But no, like, we all are invested. We're all passionate about the game. So yeah, like, it's a working group. It's a brainstorming, it's discussion. So and Phil Davies, who's head of World Rugby, he's that kind of fella. He's an old-fashioned rugby man, and he wants to get people talking about how we can make our game better.
Johnny, I'll give the final word to you. You're not secretly a fan of this DuPont law or anything, are you?
Not really, no. Yeah, I just think it can be changed very quickly, and it'll create more space, just making sure that the forwards are retreating every time. And look, fair play for them for spotting a gap in terms of the law itself and making it aware. That's really good professionalism and understanding of the laws, and they're playing within the rule book. But it obviously, everyone has to remember, and I've said this before on here, sport is entertainment. We have to entertain. If we don't entertain people aren't going to come back. And, that getting rid of that will create more of a spectacle and hopefully create more counter-attacking opportunity, which is what people want to see.
Well said. Well, hopefully in round 3 we won't see as much of that, even if it still will be in play. Ireland against Wales, that's the 2:15 game on Saturday the 24th. Scotland and England later on that evening at 4:45, and France against Italy is the Sunday game. Rugby coming up this week, it's all URC. Obviously, Friday night Munster away to the Scarlets at 7:35. Saturday doubleheader on RT2 and RT Player. You've got Leinster against Benetton, first against second in the URC at 3 o'clock, followed by Cardiff against Connacht at 5:15, and Ulster play on Sunday. They're away to the Ospreys at 3 o'clock. We will actually have an extra podcast for you on Sunday. I'll be checking in with Kildare man and former Clontarf second row Cormac Daly. He's gearing up for his first season of Super Rugby starting next week for the Queensland Reds. So make sure to tune in there. Johnny and Bernard, thanks a million for joining us as always, and we'll speak to you next week.
Thanks, Neil. See you, bye-bye.